I'm usually we start our introduction in Austrian or in German, and then we switch over to English for the talk. But now we will start in English because it's a wonderful pleasure to announce and introduce this coming talk to us, which we're doing in collaboration with the Walter Monk Foundation. And we've been talking about that topic for a long time. So I'm really excited to finally get to this point to have this as part of our virtual Astina talk series. Before we jump into that, for those who don't know me, and thanks Mary for also announcing this talk in your community. So it's wonderful to see you all. My name is Dietrich Haubenberger. I'm a neurologist by training, and I'm a clinical researcher, and I'm located in San Diego as well. And I'm part of Astina, which is short for Austrian Scientists and Scholars in North America. So we are a independent nonprofit organization of Austrian scientists and scholars here in North America. It's an organization that's been around for more than 20 years, and it's everything from a support group for Austrian scientists to a network to a resource for especially young Austrian scientists as they come to North America. We offer a mentoring program for especially young scientists. We have pretty prestigious and well-funded research awards that are handed out once a year for Austrian scientists that are in North America and are conducting excellent work. And we try to also be a platform for Austrian scientists and their work, or Austrian science in general, here in North America, and like to act also as, you can even see as a lobby of us Austrian scientists and scholars and folks that are involved with Austrian science and collaborative science between Austria and North America back to Austria. So just to tell, also the community back home in Austria that we're not lost scientists, but that essentially through this collaboration, through these networks, actually really excellent science is happening. So, and one of the things that we are offering are these virtual Astina talks. I just told Dimitri before is that the way these talks started is through very decentralized efforts where Austrian scientists just met up locally. And in my case, it was in the Washington, D.C. area when I was there. And we met once a month, and we essentially assigned every month to somebody else to just talk about what they're doing scientifically and research. And usually it was done in a very informal and informal setting. But presentation of their scientific work to the audience, typically other Austrian scientists or other folks who are interested in what Austrian scientists are doing, and then usually we had an informal ending of that with when if somebody did a talk that was too technical, then they then had to pay for the round of beer afterwards. So that was the one standard that you have to make your presentation in a way that also scientists that are, or folks that are not within your area of expertise, can understand what you're doing. So during COVID, everything switched over to virtual, and since then we started this series in a virtual setting. And with that, we have we bring all the different chapters of Astina together, and there are 13 plus chapters all over North America, including Canada and Mexico, and also Austria. So we have an alumni chapter there as well. So we always have a nice gathering of folks for these monthly talks. And what we do, if agreeable to the presenter, we are recording these meetings and these talks, and then we upload them to our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and just type in Astina, you will find our YouTube channel, and you will see all the talks, or many of the talks that we had before, to rewatch. And it became its life on its own. I was just saying is that some of these talks even made it into the scientific literature, so they're being cited. So consider this even a publication if you want to. So, but we want to still keep it very informal. The way we usually do it, we hand it over to the presenter, and then they present and go over their content. And then in the last 15 minutes, we have a Q&A, and we're happy to moderate that. But before we jump into the talk, and before I introduce, or actually I may already introduce Dimitri as our speaker today, but before I hand it over, I will want to introduce somebody else to you before we do that. But first, first foot actually let me right away now, because it's important to enter into a topic, introduce Mary before we go to Dimitri. Mary Monk is the widow of Walter Monk, and we are all here in his because of his work that he did, not only here as an oceanographer in San Diego and as a trailblazing scientist, but also, as you can say, honorary member of our Austrian Scientists in North America network over many years here in San Diego. I wasn't here yet. Walter hosted the Austrian scientists community here in San Diego, always at his home once a year for a barbecue, and had been a really poster child example of an Austrian scientist here who connected with the Austrian scientist community, with the greater North American scientist community. I personally met him about 10 years ago at the Austrian Research and Innovation Talk in Los Angeles, where he was present as well, and got to meet him, and was really inspired by his work. As you know, as they say, Walter as the Einstein of the oceans, as the trailblazer, basically founder of modern oceanography. But we'll hear more on that. And even more importantly, I'm really impressed what Mary is doing as part of the Walter Monk Foundation, keeping his legacy alive. Also, and first and foremost, scientifically, I was introduced to a few high school students last summer when they came all the way from Austria, working on essentially the topic that we'll be talking about today, taking water samples from the Lake Altaussee in Austria and coming over to San Diego to analyze them, working with Dimitri on that project. We even got to introduce one of these high school students then to the Austrian science minister at the Austrian Research and Innovation Talk last year in Chicago, and introduced that topic. And I think that's really is a perfect example of how we should work together collaboratively across continents, and how work of our big giants in the field like Walter really inspires future generations. But with that, I stop talking now. I hand it over to Mary. Maybe say a few introductory words, and then we can hand it over to Dimitri for his talk.
Thank you so much, Dietrich, for all the work you're doing here in San Diego and pulling all the Austrian scientists together. It's been a great pleasure to head the Walter Monk Foundation for the Oceans, to continue Walter's legacy of daring exploration and discovery through scientific research, education, and ocean conservation. Any of you who have not been to visit Walter Monk Plaza in Kellogg Park in La Jolla Shores, I invite you to come and let me know you're going to be here. Mary at waltermonkfoundation.org. And I'll be happy to give you a tour. We have a 2,500 square foot mosaic of the underwater park and ecological reserve, the canyons, and 123 life-size species that are found offshore, including a 31-foot image of JJ, the baby gray whale that was at SeaWorld. Also, I'd like to invite you in June, the 13th through the 16th, the community in Altaussee has named the park Walter Monk Park, and we will be installing a 1 by 2 meter bronze sculpture of the lake that we have been studying, that Walter initiated in 2018 when he was over there for 6 weeks at 100 years old, and actually went twice. Also would like to let you know that the Navy, who Walter worked with for 80 years, has named the library, the Stennis Space Center Library in Mississippi, for Walter on his birthday this year, October 19th. So we would love to work with any of you. And Dimitri is a board member of the Walter Monk Foundation for the Oceans, and instrumental in working with the 3 students that Dietrich spoke about who actually won best environmental thesis for all of Austria high school students last year. So that was on the topic and from the work that they did studying the lake. So.
Thank you, Mary. Without further ado, let me give the word to the man of the hour. Dimitri Dehaene is a research scientist at the Marine Biology Research Division of Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California in San Diego, and he's also a scientific advisor and board member of the Walter Munk Foundation, as you just heard. So Dimitri completed his PhD in Belgium, where he started his academic career. And he is, intercontinental past, having grown up in Africa and South America, really puts him at the best, spots to have a global perspective on environmental issues. So he's been working on that topic of microplastics and the impact onto oceans, lakes, rivers, and lagoons, and has been studying the Lake Altaussee, which is a wonderful microenvironment that he will talk to us about. So without further ado, Dimitri, the floor is already yours.
Great, thank you very much, both Dietrich and Mary, for the introduction and the nice word about the work that I do. So what I will talk to you about today is a big picture of the research effort that I am conducting throughout the globe, actually. We just talked about the global aspect of my upbringing, which is now also reflected in my research. And I will put that into perspective relative to some research that we also do in Austria. So the planet is blue, and we all have, as Dietrich mentioned, scientists working on different aspects of this planet. Although my perspective is that everything is connected, right? And so even though I'm a marine biologist, I am also doing research in alpine lakes, in rivers, in lagoons, and in the atmosphere, because no matter what, these ecosystems are all connected. And if we want to understand how one works and is impacted by the others, we have to also put our foot on these other ecosystems and think outside the box. Aside from being all connected, water is dominant on this planet. The planet is blue. There is much more salt water than any other ecosystem. And then your body and my body are made mostly of water, at least 70% of it. And so water is a critical mass that we have. The ocean is known to be immense. It's known to be so diverse, so deep, and without any limit to some extent. In the old days, people thought that the ocean would just continue endlessly. And of course, that we know now has been essential for the support of life on Earth. And also because the diversity of this ecosystem has created some diversity in animals before they actually could conquer the land. But yet, even though this immense ecosystem is so huge, it is also subject to the threats of human society. We thought it was invincible, and because of that, human behavior has thought that we could dump everything in it with no regret, because the ocean is endless. And so it was common practice decades ago to actually have those containers and those boats, as you can see here, dumping any other ways that you can imagine out at sea, in the deep sea. And that includes not only container ships full of chemicals, maybe oil train and wagons, to nuclear waste and ammunitions and other things like that. What we know now, of course, is the ocean is not endless. It has a limit, a capacity to carry all these waste. And here I will focus on the plastic. The plastic has been seen and observed throughout the ocean at a rate that is alarming, with about 1 dump truck load of plastic going into the ocean every second. So since we started this talk, we had at least 20 dump trucks of plastic being thrown into the ocean. It is not a drop in the ocean. It is significant when you accumulate that over time and over the years. And so plastic has been in the forefront of social media, with cover magazines of National Geographic and others. We all know that plastic is dominating the planet. So people have started to look at, okay, how much plastic there is, and why do we have so much plastic? And it's all related to how long, of course, the plastic remains in the environment. Plastic is built to last for a long time, 600 years, 1,000 years, 50 years, for items that basically are barely used more than a few seconds sometimes to hold your beers that, if we were still drinking beer within these talks, we would see the impact that we can have. So there is a lot of all of those items here that are considered waste and that will remain in the environment for quite some time, including some of these garments and things that we wear. And these are the things that I will be focusing on. If you look at the distribution of waste in the marine ecosystem, a lot of it comes from garments. So the t-shirts and the pants and the socks that you and I wear are significantly higher than any other source of plastic. The highest one being, of course, tires, because we drive a lot and tires release a lot of these small particles that are also called microplastics. So microplastic are small plastics. They are either formed as small to begin with, so those are the primary microplastics, and those are the ones that you find mostly in the the sunscreen and any kind of material that is used for the cosmetics industry. And so these plastics are small. They are usually small beads that are associated with any kind of lotion. And then you have the secondary microplastics, which are the plastics that degrade from a bigger plastic size. And the degradation is associated with a process called weathering. So if you leave a plastic outside for quite some time under UV exposure and other forces from nature, it will become brittle, and the small pieces will become microplastic, even though it's started from a larger piece. So these microplastics are invisible to the naked eye, and they are part of usually the category below 5 micron. But the small microplastic that I am particularly interested in are the microplastics in which the textile microfibers belong to. Those textile microfibers are the microfibers that shed from what you wear, from any garments that you wear and that you wash. And so when you wash your clothes and then dry them, on average, you have a release of about 2,000 microfibers per item being released. That's per item. So in a load, you have sometimes up to 700,000 of those microfibers being released, leading to, you can read that number, it's about 12 million tons of microfibers released in the environment per year. That's equivalent to, per load, about half a spoon of the of microfibers released in the environment. So that's a significant quantity, considering that we do wash our clothes, and we have the tendency in this in this society to wash a lot, buy a lot, and rewash more, and you have a little thing that is dirty and you will wash it fully. If you are aware now of what these numbers represent, think twice. Not that I invite you not to wash your clothes, but think twice about how you wash them, how often you wash them, and how often you use a dryer. since some of those clothes are made 100% of polyester, which is plastic. If you use other, materials, of course, like cotton and natural fibers, this might be more appropriate to use this process of washing and drying. So as I said, I'm focusing on this particular aspect. And then because as we wash these clothes, it goes in the water. The dryer, of course, catches some of the lint, which is the large size, but it goes into the air. We, of course, inhale of this. Those fiber textiles are mostly made of polyester. So there is a lot of research now going into what are those microfibers doing in the environment and where are they found. Well, they are found mostly everywhere. And this whole thing became obvious when testing of drinking water was made from water bottles as well as from drinking fountains, with more than 90% of the water containing microfibers in the US and about 75 or more in other countries. This was already 5 years ago, so I'm pretty sure that these numbers have increased. And so, we breed microfibers, obviously, but we also drink them. And whether you drink water, beer, wine, or anything like that, you have the microfibers in them because, of course, these liquids are not necessarily, going through ultrafiltration to retain those microfibers. So the microfibers are part of these microplastics, and they are definitely a big problem for the generation to come because of the lung disease and any chronic disease that we can imagine, but also, of course, having impact on the ecosystem and ecosystem services, impacting the reproduction and the recruitment of fishes and other invertebrates that might be of socioeconomic impact. So the microfibers have this environmental and wildlife health to public health aspect that is, of course, a big driver for me to try to address. So just to put things into perspective, these microfibers now are not only physical structures that you can see here in fluorescence, they're also reactive. Many of them are designed as microfibers to absorb either humidity, sweat, or chemicals, like what you use your microfiber cloth to clean your car or to clean your house. These are microfibers that are designed to stick things into them. And those microfibers, when released in the environment, carry, of course, germs or chemicals that you can inhale and you can drink and eat. And then, of course, to put into perspective, a microfiber is about 1/10 of the diameter of a hair, and it is, of course, much smaller than many of other fibers found from nature, although it can be also of the same size, more or less 10 micron in diameter. Now, to make sure that we understand, microfibers are just fiber pieces, small fiber pieces that are lost from the garments. They are not fibers that necessarily break from one another. The microfiber terminology originated from marine science, actually, because they were small fibers. And so this terminology is still to be defined on how it interchanges between the businesses that deal with clothing and fiber technology versus what we as marine biologists identify as microfibers, but see microfibers as being small pieces of fibers that are shedded from garments. Okay, so in this perspective, now you have a good background of what microfibers are. As I said, they are part of the environment. We drink them, we breathe them. We are part of the environment, so we should not believe that even though microfibers are in the air, the water, and the food, that we are not sensitive to that. And that's exactly what motivates my research. The global aspect of my research is represented here in this little schematic, where, of course, I'm a marine biologist, so I started working on aspects of microfiber here in San Diego, California, but I expanded my research in more exotic places like La Paz, Mexico, in which we study mostly how microfibers affect larger animals like like whale sharks and Mobula rays, which are related to Walter Munk, species that has been named after him. But after these places, of course, we're interested in how do microfibers spread around the world. And we look at air sampling. So we have different devices that we collect air samples from, and in which we quantify microfibers. We did that in Ghana, we did that in Austria, in San Diego. But we also did an experiment or an expedition pole to pole, which I will relate today. Of course, when my fibers are into the sky and into the clouds, they fall back on Earth with snow and rain. And of course, that's where our research in Altaussee has been instrumental, since Altaussee is considered a very pristine area with really not much of a civilization around the lake, allowing us to study how much microfibers really come from in a airborne system. But we also compare that to research that we do in the Eastern Sierras here in California. And of course, all this goes down to rivers. We study rivers, and we did this very thoroughly through the Volta River in Ghana, where a swimmer actually swam the river 400 kilometers down the river for about a month and collected samples of water for microfiber analysis along the journey. And then we, of course, work in Accra, where the river arrives as well. So these are the various big picture research that we do. I will only touch on some today, but then we'll, of course, end up with talking about the research that we do in Altaussee and in Austria in general. So how do we do this work? This work is coming from a collaboration with many different groups. We believe, or I believe, in the citizen science and evolving students. We work, therefore, with different expeditions, different foundations and organizations that are working themselves around the world, and we take advantage of that to team up with the local community, like we did in Altaussee, where we work with the local high school to perform some amazing work with the students that were attending the school. These are a template of all the different places where we have collected samples so far, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, and also from the surface water down to 10,000 meters deep. This is basically how we collect the samples. Most of the time, people will use a manta net for collecting microplastics, and most of the research that you will see today, I'm trying to play this somehow. Here you go. So the manta net is a net that allows to collect particles that are at the surface. And that's most of the time what people use to measure plastic or microplastic in the ocean. The manta net is great in the sense that you can collect a lot of plastic, but you have to trail it for quite some time. The problem is that, of course, at the end of the net, you have a mesh size of usually 100 microns. So anything that is smaller than that will flow through. And so manta net is good for microplastic, but is not ideal for microfibers, which are smaller than 100 micron. And as such, we use a system that we collect directly the water from the surface. We filter the water into a small filter of 0.22 micron diameter of mesh, and then we can then analyze the microfibers that are on the filter. And we do the same when we collect snow samples. We look at the snow from the surface, and then we pile it up. We let the snow melt, and then we filter that, and that will give us an idea of how much of the microfibers there are. We have certain protocols, of course, and controls to collect stuff, downwind and in a particular way, so that we avoid contamination as much as possible. We also, of course, try to standardize this and make it also as simple as possible, so that if someone wants to collect sample from their backyard somewhere in the world, I can easily send a few of those tubes, a few of the filters, and then we receive samples back, for analysis. So that's the power of the citizen science, knowing that, of course, not every sample will be collected the same way, but the numbers that will be added will be, of course, interesting. So as we do that, we also team up with, some expeditions. Micromar is what we started with Patrizia Preto, who is based in Italy, which is basically a network that we are developing to involve high school students as well as citizen science, and coordinate that to get samples from a large, geographical area. Patrizia has been very keen in getting samples from almost all around the Mediterranean Sea, and so that we can have a big picture of how these microfibers distribute around the sea. This guy here, Tez, is living actually today, maybe as I speak, on this boat. He was already crossing he crossed from San Francisco to Hawaii about 2 years ago. It took him about 2 months to cross that leg, and along his journey, he collected water sample as well for microfiber analysis. And now he's leaving today. You can check his website, unitedworldchallenge.org. I think he's leaving today from Hawaii, and he's going to be going all the way to Australia in a 6-month journey. He has an instrument that will collect air samples as well as water sample. And of course, his whole mission is to do that, to bring conservation and awareness about plastic issues. So these are the kind of things that we, of course, take advantage of with, of course, students collecting samples all around the world. Now, let's focus on some of the research that we have done. I'm starting with Ghana, where, of course, we work on the textile microfiber. Ghana is the place where you have the first or second largest second-hand clothing market. So you have, on average, 20 to 40 tons of not new, but a new arrival of used textile that are brought to this market. These are donations from Europe and from the US, each sending 1 container every week. This, of course, inundates the market, as you can see here. A lot of clothes everywhere. The surface area of this place is amazing. There are more than 2,000 shops that sell clothes, and you can walk there every week, and there will be a new arrival of clothes, and it goes from shoes to different types of clothing. And then, of course, you have local community, redesigning some of the clothing by, reorganizing some of the painting and some of the color on them. So this is a major site of second-hand clothing with here the new clothes that just arrived. The only issue, of course, is that it saturates the market. 20 tons of clothes every week represents about 50,000 pieces of garments. You have that every week. The population of Ghana is not as big to support that. And because of that, of course, it ends into pollution. So a lot of these clothes are not sold. They ended up in different landfills. The landfill got totally saturated, so it ended up directly in the lagoons surrounding the market, where now you can walk on areas that used to be a marsh, and you can see housing, being developed, and people live there, and they have been for the last 10 or 15 years. And of course, these pieces of plastic and clothing are exposed to the weathering, to the UV, to the heat, to the rain, and of course, it contaminates the local lagoon. The people now have been used to, inhabit this environment. They top it off every now and then with wood chips or with soil, and it keeps adding up and piling up. Now you have also grazing communities. You have this mountain here that is made entirely of textile waste. This is a situation that is very daring. This is a picture of the beach here, where the beach, you can't even see the sand, as it is, can be very bad. To give you a perspective of our preliminary analysis, now that we are, I cannot, give too much detail because the paper is being submitted. But on average, along the coastline of the ocean around the world, you have 1 to 5 or up to 30 maybe microfiber per liter. Considering various research that has been done on open ocean. In the lagoons here, we have looked at different types of lagoons, some that are pristine, being away from any market or industrial places, and then some are impacted where we have some communities, and of course the very highly impacted one like the one in Accra. And you can see that the numbers that we observed of microfibers per liter go way beyond the average that is otherwise recorded for elsewhere in the world, going into the hundreds, which is, of course, a dramatic point where we see, of course, all these pieces of clothing that are still there and not degraded yet, and are continuously producing microfibers that enter the water. So that's a big issue that I'm working on actively with local foundations, and trying to remediate and what to do with that, trying to quantify and bring awareness to the local community, and of course to the local government to organize a cleanup, obviously, and then of course follow up on any kind of human health, public health impact. The lagoons are very polluted. The market obviously releases microfibers in the air, so we are interested in see what goes on into the air. And so in this particular case here, I team up with Robert De Laurentiis, who is an explorer and aviator, who decided to use a small plane called the Citizen of the World to go around the world, but instead of going around the world along the equator, it went from pole to pole. And this expedition took place right during COVID. This is the route that it took, leaving from, actually left from San Diego, went all the way to the South Pole, to Europe, North Pole, and then back to San Diego. And along the way, he was collecting, he needed to have some sort of way to collect plastic, but in a fashion that was extremely light and not involving any kind of instrumentation, because his plane was basically 90% filled with a fuel tank, because as you can imagine, these long flights here along the pole needed extra fuel that he didn't have any space in his cockpit to have any kind of instrument. So what we came up with, and you can barely see it here, but we actually came up, I thought that, let's try to put just double-sided tape. A little bit more sophisticated than that. It's not a regular tape, but it's, a sticky pad that is sticking at the both sides. And so basically we put this double-sided tape on the nose of his plane, but also on each side of the wings. And we decided to try to see what do we get from these particles as he takes off and then lands in a different country. And so this is kind of a schematic of the time that he spends. So if he's here on the runway, it takes off. It takes about 3% of his time, and then it takes off in that sense to its altitude, which is 10,000 meters, 30,000 feet, and it stays there for the duration of the flight. Then it goes back down and then back on the runway. So divided in time, the runway time is about 3% total. The ascent time is about 7%, and most of the time that it spends, of course, in the air, is at 30,000 feet or 10,000 meters, with of course a constant speed, etc., etc. And so we have three case scenario here, of course. So he could, the sticky tapes could pick up the plastic when it takes off or where it lands. It could also pick it up with any kind of cloud that would be crossing during his ascent. And of course, third case scenario, it would be in a cloud of plastic that he collects plastic along the way as he flies at 30,000 feet. Of course, this is all dependent of how much the angle of a microfiber will hit these sticky tapes. It depends on the, we are aware, of course, that minus 60 degrees, the sticky tape might not work as much. So you need to have a true impact. But all this is important to see because we wanted to know, is there a difference? So obviously, if the process of collecting samples was driven by only the scenario number one, one would know that you will have, if you take off from San Diego or Los Angeles, you will probably have more microfibers on the sticky tape than if you were, taking from Ushuaia or the North Pole or any remote area in Africa. Also, if the 10,000 feet is critical for the microfibers to stick to the tape, you would expect the length of the leg between two cities to have an impact on the number of microfibers, because of course the longer you stay at that altitude, the more chances you have for microfibers to hit the that little patch of sticky tape that we put on this plane. So these are relative assessment that we made. But as a preliminary result, and again, this is preliminary for many reasons, including the fact that we are preparing a publication on this. But what we observe is, first of all, that everywhere he flew, he was able to collect, microfibers on these sticks, on the sticky tape. But also that there is a trend that there is maybe less of these microfibers around the equator than they were around the poles. But most importantly also is that the numbers that you observe here were not depending on the length between different areas, including that, whether you are in Africa or South America or even in the US, you don't see a very big difference in the number of microfibers sticking to this tape. So this global picture gives us a sense that basically microfibers are everywhere. They are not necessarily dependent on the size of the airport or the city that you are taking off from, and nor is it dependent on the length and what you cross or as you go from one city to the other. But it is also indicative that microfibers can travel around the world by trade winds and by winds, as it has been reported in the past. So let's go much closer to home now, where of course the microfibers are in the air, and we look at how they fall down in the mountains. This is an image in the Hilton Lakes in the Sierras here in California, and of course much closer to you guys, Altaussee Lakes in Austria. In those places, we collect snow sample, water samples, lake sample, rain sample, all kinds of samples that you can imagine directly for microfiber analysis with and air as well. With the concept that we want to try to see, of course, how much does it fall from the sky, and even though you're a remote place with no direct input from a little village directly on the lake, how much does that how much microfiber do we observe, and what's the seasonality of it? For Altaussee in particular, as it was mentioned earlier during this talk in the introduction, we work with a high school that I will let you pronounce in German. I will not try that. But we work still now with the high school. We had 3 students, Eric, Manuel, and Matthias, involved in this in the last 2 years. We have 3 new students now to continue the research since those 3 graduated. And we collected, or they collected, samples from, as I said, snow, water from the lake, from the rivers, water samples from the, any kind of drinking water. And I usually meet with the student online, and we direct them on the research on what to do. We go also to Altaussee at least once a year. This has been supported by different communities. As you can see, this is me in the middle here. I became Austrian from one night at least, wearing the traditional clothing. And all this has led to not only an amazing experience for me as an individual and as a scientist, but also I think for the student, who obviously, as it was mentioned, won a different big awards for their research in this area. So the research was, pretty elaborated and very challenging. This is the lake of Altaussee. We were planning on collecting, of course, samples at the surface, at the depth, from the various different areas that feed into the lake. Doing that, of course, over time, and to look at the effect of season, and to look, of course, at how much water comes from the snow melting or from the stream feeding on this lake, which is considered one of the very pristine and lake in Austria. And so very quick, we found microfibers. Obviously, we found microfibers in the air and the stream water. We found water microfiber in every single topic matrix that we analyzed. And so microfibers are around. Now we are looking at, we are publishing this, but we're also working on identifying what are those microfibers, what kind of material are they made of? Are they made of from polyester or any kind of source that can be coming from the Loser, which is a ski area next to Altaussee, or is it coming from somewhere else? And are the microfibers, young versus old? So these are, confirmation that those microfibers are obviously not coming from the village itself, because there is nothing going into the lake from the village, but comes from elsewhere. And now correlating this data with wind profile, precipitation profile, snow profile is what the publication will be about, which is something that I can talk about next time we meet on this platform. So where do we go from here? So we know that microfibers are everywhere. We looked at waterways, we monitor, we try to understand where they go, where they come from, and what to do with them. If you do wash your clothes, and I have the frenzy of washing them pretty often, we can use different systems that are filtering the water, like the Guppy Friend here, which is a pouch in which you put your clothes made of polyester, and that pouch will retain most of the microfibers. We can also install a filter on the back end of your washing machine that is sold, for example, from microfibersolution.com. Those are small filters that cost $100 a piece, but retain 90+% of microfiber. So those are solutions. But also a solution is, of course, working with industry and the clothing industry in particular. With the foundation in Ghana, we work on trying to change the way people deal with fast fashion, educate people on what fast fashion actually is. But we work also with the manufacturers of fibers. In this case, also related to Austria, we work with Lenzing. And Lenzing is this amazing company that is making alternative materials that can replace plastic and that can make your piece of clothing very nice to the touch, but also being able to biodegrade in the environment with less impact than what polyester would do. And so with Lenzing, we have worked on this very topic where we work, as I said, on the biodisintegration, which is the process where a structure falls apart and loses its capacity of performing a function. So your clothing falls apart and is not a piece of clothes anymore, a bunch of small pieces. Once you have those small pieces here, then you can go the step of biodegradation, which transform these small pieces into carbon, nitrogen, phosphate, which is all what that biology can use. And so a first publication that we made was, for example, to take pieces of the material that Lenzing prepares for the clothing industry and test directly in seawater how a piece of this textile, which is here, dyed in red for easy to watch. How does that biodisintegrate over time? And can we quantify this by using imaging, looking at the piece with the light in the background and taking pictures, and then looking at the intensity of the pixels. So it shows that it takes 3 or 4 about 30 days for the material to start here and become denser, because you have microbial communities growing on them, and it becomes much more translucent because it's become thinner and thinner, being eaten up by the microbes. So this is a demonstration that, of course, some of the material made by lensing is able to biodegrade directly in seawater, which is the first demonstration of that. We did, of course, this experiment also with polyester and with other materials, which didn't change over time at all. To do the comparison, we actually did also an experiment similar to that one, but directly into the ocean, where we put this swatch of material into literally cages, and that were floating or anchored at the bottom of the ocean. We compare a variety of different types of sample from lensing, but also polyester, cotton, PLA. And what we observe is that when you have this cellulose-based material, which is the product from here, lyocell, which is a product from lensing, it takes about 28 days for that product to be fully disintegrated, so it's gone. The same for organic cotton. Then you have the bioplastic. Everyone is saying, oh, bioplastic, it has the word bio, it's fantastic, it's probably biodisintegrate. It is not the case. Bioplastic like PLA, which is basically what makes all the cups and the biodegradable, in quote, material that you use for parties, the straws, the plates, and everything. PLA, it is not biodegradable, it does not biodisintegrate in seawater, and that is well known. Actually, only biodisintegrate in industrial composting. And then you have different blends. If you mix lyocell with any other synthetic fiber, does it help the synthetic fiber to degrade? The answer is no. And then you have, of course, purely synthetic fibers here. So this is a visual that we kept these materials more than 200 days in seawater, and some of them really barely change. We did the barely change visually. We looked at this material, in this case, polyester and lyocell, in scanning electron microscopy, which we published a couple of years ago now. You can see that after 210 days, the polyester barely changed the diameter of the fibers, which is understandable because polyester is made to last for a long time. Lyocell, in contrast, decreased the diameter of its fiber very rapidly within a month. And you can see here the difference between the materials, the polyester being somewhat clean still after 200 days in water, whereas the lyocell is already covered with biofilm and being biodisintegrated and, of course, biodegraded at the same time. We looked at the chemistry as well. It was important to demonstrate that is there something changing in the chemistry. Polyester, this is FTIR, or infrared technology that allows you to look at the energy of the bonds that make your material. Basically in a nutshell, the results showed that the polyester still remained polyester with regards to the infrared signature, showing that the fundamental chemistry of the polyester did not change after being immersed in water for more than 200 days. And this, of course, changed dramatically for lyocell, which we know has been fully altered by being in the water for 28 days in this case. What was interesting to me in particular is to look at the blend materials, which we left for more than 450 days, which was a blend of a synthetic material, whether it's PLA, polylactic acid, or polypropylene, polystyrene, polyethylene, polyester. All these will behave the same when it's mixed to lyocell, which is a cellulose-based fiber coming from lensing. You see that the material here, which is the synthetic one, here the synthetic and the blend with cellulose-based material, only a few fibers are covered and being degraded by the microbes, demonstrating here that if you have a blend material, a textile, the microbes know where to settle and what is a friendly environment, and they will target that directly, as opposed to have the anthropocentric belief that these microbes, once they are there, will also biodegrade the synthetic fibers, which obviously did not seem to appear and did not seem to be the case, since we have seen that after more than 200 days, a blend material still shows as a full business card surface, of which maybe half of it has disappeared because it was the half that was made of a biodegradable material like lyocell, which this was published earlier this year. So that was a lot of information about what we do, what we have done, and also explaining where do we go from here. So we look at the materials that are used to make clothing, whether it's the cellulosic fibers from lensing or synthetic fibers. We're interested, of course, in looking at the biodisintegration and biodegradation, and also looking at the toxicity associated with that, because some of these compounds that are falling from the clothing falling apart are definitely, we don't know anything about the toxicity. That's relevant because these fibers are not just the raw material. They have a lot of chemicals added to it. There are about 3,000 chemicals that the industry is using, whether it's a UV protectant, a finishing, a dye, a water repellent. So we want to try to look at all those different aspects that are part of the clothing industry to pinpoint more specifically where can we improve and look at what nature does and what needs to be changed for a material to be more friendly for the ecosystem. So in a nutshell, the take-home message is that microfibers are found everywhere. We study their life cycle, and which is, I think, important to develop awareness and bring policymakers around the table to start regulating the fashion industry, but also any other use of plastic that can degrade into a secondary microplastic. We know that microfibers are found around the world. So when you make your next wash and drying, please remember that you will spread those fibers that might be found somewhere tomorrow and will come back to you maybe in a year from now. And so we don't know that, and that would be something that we are trying to pinpoint and to address. And of course, the fast fashion industry and the clothing industry need to have some reforms, and working with industry like the one in Austria, like lensing, will help us bring together new materials that can help alleviate some of these effects of the waste that we observe right now around the world. So with this, I'd like to thank everyone for your attention. You can reach me for questions. Here is my email, and here are the various partners that I work with to make this happen, not including, of course, the many volunteers and many students around the world that have been involved in the collection of those samples. So thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri, for this really wonderful and excellent talk, really connecting San Diego to Austria to the whole world for this so important topic. So we are already at the top of the hour, but I think we have time for one or two questions. So feel free to come off camera and ask your question or type into the chat, whatever you want.
Yeah, my name is Mike McCormick, and I actually spent time down at the Monk Map and have been observing just the flow of plastics. And it's not just the microfibers. Obviously, the microfibers are the hidden ones. But a tarp that I used, I swept it off, and sure enough, there was just the tiniest little plastic that was degrading off of it. The playground is degrading its plastic. And the only conclusion I came to is we really have to eliminate this non-biodegradable stuff out of our ecosystems. Otherwise, it's just a slow pollution over hundreds and centuries. So it needs to happen. Maybe you can comment on that.
Mike, I totally agree with you. That's the whole motivation that we have to try to make people aware of this. You are aware of it because you go there, often enough that you see how things degrade. People go there, once in a while or use something once in a while, and then they don't really pay attention to this. People don't realize that you buy, I don't know, an umbrella that suddenly falls apart. People just automatically toss the umbrella and then go and buy a new one. Try to look at bringing awareness of it is essential. Trying to work with new materials again that can make especially all the materials that are exposed to the elements. We should make them in a material that can be that can break down and biodegrade, because plastic, even though it's long lasting, will still be exposed to weathering and will still be break down into smaller pieces. What we want to make sure is that those smaller pieces not become biodegradable, as you just mentioned. So I think that we start by educating each other. This is why I'm here today. And I think this is, share your experience with your loved ones that can share that with their loved ones, and the network of people is the best way to make a change happen, and to make people aware that you can buy things that might be a little bit more expensive, but it will be in the long run much more beneficial for the environment.
Very interesting talk, Dimitri. And my area is construction and materials. In terms of sustainability, we look there from a slightly different angle, of course, on the carbon footprint. But yeah, it makes me second guess just wearing my comfortable shirt that is very elastic. And so maybe a task for material scientists to develop equally comfortable clothing, of course. But my question was also on the biocompostable materials. Are those showing up as well? Is this or are those really being so compostable forks and plastics that are marketed as sustainable? And of course, we then know they're only compostable in a certain facility if they are returned to that. So will those compostable plastics, do you know anything about that, also show up in our environment?
Yes, they are. So as you mentioned, the compostable materials, sometimes called bioplastics, are misleading, because people believe that if they are compostable, if you toss them in the water or in your backyard, they will eventually break down and degrade, which is not the case. Most of these materials need to be composted into an industrial compost facility, which brings temperatures and pH to different levels that are not otherwise found in nature. So the compostability of a material is only effective if the waste management stream is effective on their end, saying that, if you use these cups made of PLA, when you go to a party, they need to be trashed or put together in a trash, and that trash would go specifically to that compost facility, which of course is not happening. In the US, we only have a handful of those facilities that have been, saturated, very rapidly, and it costs too much money for every city to have such facility. So that's the conundrum, and that's the greenwashing that has been around bioplastic. So they will stay around like any other synthetic plastic if they are not into that bioreactor or biocompost facility that's at the industrial level. So yeah.
Thanks.
And just to relate to your question too, we do work with a lot of architects and construction industries to find ways to alleviate some of these the contribution of microplastics and microfibers from the construction building aspect of it, which of course paint also contains a lot of microplastic, and any other material that is used by architect designers sometimes are use of microplastic that can be that could easily be made of a different material and be more resistant to weathering.
Yeah, waste is extensive, and of course there are many greenwashing politics in probably every industry, and so we're fighting that too. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Georg. Maybe one more question. If we don't have any more questions, then I just wanted to say two things. First, I posted the link to the YouTube channel into the chat if you're interested in listening to many other very interesting talks about Neanderthals and Austrian German. We have Stefan Dorlinger here on the call who gave an excellent talk about Austrian German. I can really highly recommend that, but you have to be able to speak German to understand that. Yeah, feel free to check that out. Follow us on the social media channels. I'm really thankful and grateful to Mary and Dimitri for your entire effort in on multiple levels getting this important topic continued to be worked on, and doing that in a way that connects the next generation of scientists over in Austria to this global important topic. Thanks for also Walter, to keeping the Walter Munk legacy going. Really excited about the work that's happening here, and of course, thanks for creating this wonderful place here in San Diego. And I would really want to echo what Mary just said at the beginning. If you're ever here in San Diego, come down to La Jolla and check out the place that Mary built here in honor of Walter. So with that, I say thank you, everybody. Check out the Asina website if you're an Austrian scientist. Make sure you sign up for our newsletter. Other than that, we'll come back in January for our next talk. We will invite a lawyer actually who works with us on topics like double citizenship. So if you're interested in that, feel free to join us. Other than that, Mary, I give you the last word of this talk.
I can hear you, Mary.
Now.
Oh,
now. Try now.
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to unmute myself. I just want to echo Dietrich's good wishes, and really hope you'll follow what's happening with the Walter Munk Foundation for the Oceans, and what's happening in Altaussee and the shores, and take heed to what Dimitri is letting you know. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Fat dog, yeah.
Great talk.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Right. Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.